When you make monumental changes to just about everything about you, people notice, and they ask questions. People want to know, what are you doing? How are you doing it? And if you're anything like me, it's awfully fun to know something that it seems everyone else would like to know. And it's even more fun to teach it to somebody else. This must have happened to me at least a dozen times over the course of a couple of years. During that time, I remarried, dove headlong into a blended family of 6 kids, 3 boys and 3 girls, and with the encouragement of my wife, decided to check into a master's program and see what this was all about. You see, I knew what I was doing, but I really had no idea what I was doing. And if I was going to keep doing this, I needed to find that out. Once I got into the master's program, things really took off. I was excited to learn about all of the theories of change that have been developed over the years. It was also exciting to realize that most of them have been developed in my lifetime. Cognitive behavioral strategies, CBT, were being developed on the East Coast in the 1960s, and neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, was being developed on the West Coast in the 70s. I was born in '61, so all of that happened in my lifetime. Most of my classmates hated the theory classes, but me, I couldn't get enough. I was fascinated by all of the various theoretical explanations for how problems occurred, and even more fascinated with the solutions for how to make change happen. I guess it's no wonder that science was always my favorite class in school. I was never really that get in touch with your feelings kind of guy, so science was very appealing to me. My master's program, the one that I was in, was very, very well designed. Not only did we look at the theoretical and clinical side of counseling, but we were also introduced to the practical side. And that's why Dr. David Burns' Feeling Good Handbook showed up as a required text in the curriculum of one of my theories classes. It was certainly not a book that was written to be a graduate school text. It was written for the masses. As it turns out, though, this book was one of the more influential texts in the whole program for me. And it's probably been the book that I have referred to the most since completing my master's program. At the time, Dr. David Burns' ideas were pretty revolutionary. They were simply his way of getting his ideas across to his own clients in his practice. He devised worksheets, experiments, step-by-step processes to, as he described it, untwist your thinking. He also described what he called the 10 cognitive distortions. He described them with definitions and supporting anecdotal stories that most people could identify with in some way. His exercises were pen and paper exercises that you did right in the book. So the book was actually a personal workbook. In fact, here's a funny little story. I bought my textbook used. I found out after I bought it that the person who had owned it before had written their own personal ideas in some of the workbook pages and then had conveniently ripped them out to maintain their own privacy, I presume. So my book actually had pages missing. Fortunately, it was only a few pages, so I just made some copies and stuffed them in. The idea of putting actual workbook-type exercises in a book was a bit revolutionary at the time. It was one of the first of its kind that dealt with cognitive behavioral theory, that's for sure. Many therapists of the day would assign their clients the task of purchasing that book and then working through it. I had 2 fundamental issues with doing that. First of all, I thought it was lazy-ass therapy. And secondly, people just wouldn't do it. Oh, you could probably get people to buy the book, and they might start reading it. They might even finish it, might even do some of the assignments. But it never really stuck. So instead of asking my clients to go out and purchase the book, I would take the ideas and create my own worksheets from the ideas that Dr. Burns had presented. It took a bit to type all those things out, but in the end I found it was far more useful for me because the explanations that I put on the sheets would be in my own words, and I could tweak the ideas to fit how I explained them. Now, I knew from my own personal experience and from the experience of watching other people struggle with writing things down, be that in a journal or on a worksheet, that it was far more powerful than simply trying to think in better ways. But one problem remained. Most people still wouldn't do it. Usually, people would buy a journal or a notebook at my suggestion, and then within a few weeks it would be on the nightstand left untouched. They might do a bit better with worksheets, but after the first few times they would come back without them or simply admit they hadn't touched them. What I did realize, even back in the early 2000s, was that more and more people were coming in with their cell phones. I graduated from my master's program in 2002, and if you know anything about the cell phone revolution, that was the decade of 3G. 3G was introduced in 2001 and quickly revolutionized what we could do with our cell phones. With 3G, people could now transfer emails and instant messages instead of just voice calls. This was the decade of the texting revolution, and it took off hard. The journal and workbooks that I encouraged people to use would sit on the nightstand, but the cell phone surely didn't get left there. I quickly realized that cell phones had people's full attention. My worksheets and their journals certainly didn't have that kind of attention. I remember thinking, man, I wish I could get inside that cell phone. How prophetic those words turned out to be. If you're listening to this on your phone, then I have virtually accomplished that goal. Texting became a way of life when users could start sending text messages to people using different mobile networks from their own. From 2002 to about 2008, I watched the texting revolution catch fire. I'll admit, I wasn't one to immediately jump on the bandwagon. I couldn't see at first what the hype was all about. It seemed far easier to simply pick up the phone and give somebody a call. Furthermore, I was kind of preoccupied with my job. It was my first therapy job out of graduate school, and I just wanted to make a statement. And that, I believe I did. In 3 short years, I had worked my way from entry-level therapist to clinical director of the agency. I had a lot of responsibilities that kept me preoccupied with administrative duties rather than actual therapy. I did maintain a relatively small caseload, though, even as the clinical director, just to make sure I would keep up with my therapeutic skills. And in those sessions, what I saw happening with the cell phone continued to intrigue me. During the sessions I conducted with clients, they would have their cell phone in their hand or on the table where they could see it, or maybe in their pocket, somewhere very handy. We would be talking about something very salient, and the cell phone would vibrate. At that very moment, I knew I had completely lost them. It became almost a game for me. I would bet how long it would take them to find a good reason to glance at their phone. I would maintain eye contact purposefully to see how long they could go without breaking eye contact to glance down at their phones. I could tell they weren't processing a word I was saying. I could see them jonesing to see who had texted them. Finally, I'd let them off the hook and glance away myself, either to make a note in my chart or grab a piece of paper, and then I would steal a glance back at them immediately. And sure enough, they were looking at their phone. Those situations haunted me, but in a very good way. I could have been upset that their cell phones commanded more attention than I did, but that really wasn't the point. I had to find a way to hijack whatever mechanism it was that was commandeering their full attention on that cell phone. That kind of focus, that kind of attention on something is really the holy grail of change. And I just had to find a way.